About 5 years ago, I got so annoyed with Google Search that I built my own search engine. I was just annoyed with Google Ads. They were everywhere. This is a search for a mobile phone and all I can see is ads. Google has to keep growing its revenue to make its shareholders happy. When I think about the vast amounts of money that go to Google to make the experience worse for users, it makes me sick. Mainly because I want some of that money, but also because it's wrong. Search engines are the gateways to the world's knowledge. I'm pretty sure we can do better than this. The root of the problem is enshittification. This is the idea that companies incentivized by profit will eventually harm the user experience to make more money. This is how Cory Doctorow defines enshittification. It's a three-stage process. First, platforms are good to their users. Then they abuse their users to make things better for their business customers. Finally, they abuse those business customers to claw back all the value for themselves. Then they die. Thanks, Cory. So I realized that to avoid enshittification, there had to be a non-profit search engine. If there's no profit, there's no incentive to make things worse. I searched around for non-profit search engines, and I found almost nothing. There was Ecosia, which donated a portion of profits to planting trees. It's a social enterprise rather than a non-profit, and they still show ads. There was DuckDuckGo, which makes a big deal about user privacy, but still makes profit and still shows ads. There was Yasi, which is a decentralized search engine. It is ad-free and non-profit, but it is also slow because it's decentralized and doesn't give you a traditional experience. There was nothing for it. I was going to have to build my own search engine from scratch. I found it without ads. Wikipedia can do it. Why can't we do the same for search? Of course, this was just a fun side project. I couldn't take this too seriously. If I did, it might stop being fun. So I focused on the technical challenges, and I'd already made a start because something else was annoying me, Google Autocomplete. At the time, if you searched for a domain you hadn't visited before, let's say apple.com, you would see results like Apple TV or Apple Watch, but there was no way to go straight to apple.com. You had to go through a page of search results because Google wanted you to see more ads. Google had gotten so greedy that they were making search bad for users. And so I started building something that would solve this problem myself. At first, I just built a graph around Google Search that allowed you to go straight to the results via autocomplete. This worked fine, but if I wanted to offer this functionality to other people, they would have to run some kind of server on their own machine. Not exactly user-friendly. So I tried out the Bing API instead. That worked okay, and I thought I was done. But when I realized that we needed to make the search engine non-profit, I knew we couldn't continue using Bing. It was expensive, and more annoyingly, it was slow. And I knew whatever we built would not have a traditional search engine architecture. That would need too many machines. In order to make this work, we had to make it cheap to run. That meant designing a new architecture. I thought and experimented in design and eventually came up with something that worked. It's so efficient that it runs on a single machine and can happily store 2.4 billion search results in a 400 gigabyte index. It's written in Python and runs on Linux, and I open sourced it under the GPL version 3. I know that Python isn't the best choice for a search engine, but I also knew I could get something quickly done in Python, so I planned to eventually translate it to Rust. But something was missing. It wasn't enough to build a search engine, but I decided I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. Even if this meant that the project was getting more serious, I knew that if other people cared about the idea, the technical challenges could be overcome. Building a search engine is a really big job, and it actually needs lots of people. One person can't do this on their own, and I certainly can't do it on my own. For example, I'm not a designer. The web is a big place to crawl all by yourself, and I knew that I didn't have the computing resources to do that. So anyway, I posted it on Hacker News, and it quickly got to the front page, gaining hundreds of stars on GitHub. I called the search engine Mumble, spelled MWMBL, after the town in Wales we had just moved to. Some people were skeptical, but there was definitely some excitement, enough to keep me going. And something amazing happened. Colin offered to build a front end for us, which was amazing. And we now have a new front end in alpha built by Relmi and Zinni. Then I thought about crawling the web. At first I used Common Crawl, but I wanted to start with an English language search engine. Debugging is much easier if you speak the language, but English was only a small proportion of Common Crawl. Also, there seemed to be a lot of rubbish in there. I only wanted to index content from the best sites since we don't have a lot of space. By the time we'd sifted through all the data we didn't want, it would have been faster to retrieve the page from its original source. So I realized we needed our own crawler. I had the idea of building a distributed crawler. The web would be crawled by volunteers on their own machines, and we would take the results and add to our index. This started with our Firefox extension, and then we added a command line web crawler. Now we are crawling millions of pages a day. Crawling the web is important, but it's not enough. We need to know how to order search results. That's where our next set of volunteers come in. Crawling the web is important, but it's not enough. We need to know how to order our search results, and that's where our next set of volunteers came in. We added the ability for users to curate search results, so they can reorder the search results, add new ones, or remove them. Crawling the web is important, but it's not enough. We need to know how to order our search results, and that's where our next set of volunteers come in. We added the ability to curate the search results. Users can rearrange search results and add new ones, and volunteers have since responded with over 30,000 curations. We also made it so you can choose which sites we crawl. We now have over 5,000 suggested domains. User contributions need to be moderated, of course, and we now have a small moderation team consisting of Hexwise, Binsyboy, and Atul Kozelska. We have a real community, which is amazing, but it's still not enough. A few weeks ago, Camilo got in touch and asked to help out with the project. Camilo is a lawyer who specialises in EU law. He was excited about the project, and he and I jumped on a call. You need a legal entity, said Camilo. At the moment, you could be personally liable if something goes wrong. I could end up in thousands of pounds of debt. It wasn't just the liability, it is also about building something bigger than a piece of software. Something bigger than me and the volunteers, something that would last. I knew we needed a legal entity, but I'd been putting it off. There seemed to be too many choices, and the one that I thought was best, a company limited by guarantee, wasn't popular with the community. I think that was because it sounds like a for-profit company, but it's actually a standard way to form a non-profit in the UK. For example, OpenStreetMap is a company limited by guarantee. I think the real reason I was putting it off was that I was afraid to take the next step. Forming a legal entity raises the stakes, but why does that matter unless I didn't really believe in the project? Camilo agreed to do some research into what would be the best form of legal entity in the UK. He came back recommending a company limited by guarantee. He also helped us create a data privacy policy and terms and conditions which are now live on the website. This has been great for the site because it's pushed me to implement privacy measures that I'd been wanting to do for a long time. We do not log search queries or IP addresses. We're about as private as possible. And Camilo said one more thing. Mumble is seriously one of the most promising projects. I do believe with all my heart and brain that this search engine will help the internet. Camilo believes. Who am I to doubt? Please join our community at mumble.org, mwmbl.org. Thank you.